Hey.
We did it.
It said
we're live again. I don't know how this keeps happening.
Who knew? It was saying that I had, excuse me, I had a connection issue. So I was like trying to press on the button, and here we are live. It's Wednesday, I think. Yes, Wednesday. Hump day. Also Degen day.
Probably I think, and I could be wrong, but I think Friday is our 200th episode.
Really?
Yeah, because it was supposed to be today, but then we took Thanksgiving off.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
We're
so
almost
that's
at
just at 198. We've done this 198 times. You'd think we know when we go live.
You would think we know what we're doing, but as you can tell, we're a live show, and we're definitely not perfect. So we screw up all the time. We say dumb shit, but it's live. It's unedited. Help us get the word out. Like, share, subscribe. We're on all the major venues. Yada, yada, blah, blah. All right. Quick shout out to our friends at Halborn Security Firm, Audit Firm. I'm a big fan of Halborn. This is an old merch that's like the softest cotton that exists. So I wear it sparingly so that I don't wear it out. So Halborn, if you're listening or watching, I need a new one. Anyways, all right. What are we freaking talking about today?
Okay, we're going to talk about Uniswap for probably most of this episode.
Oh, Uniswap episode.
Yeah. Has Uniswap blown up on your Twitter feed?
Well, it hasn't necessarily blown up on my Twitter feed, but I mean, there is a good amount of discussion about Uniswap, their governance. I've got a lot of thoughts on this one, obviously. And so we can definitely chat about it. What else we got?
And then we'll dive into Sol and Kyber, maybe Azuki, CoinW, and Femex.
And what was the last one?
Femex.
Oh, Femex. That's a weird name.
It sounds like a villain to me. It's like a crypto villain. I'm not saying they are a crypto villain. I have no opinions about Femex. Just that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, like I've never even heard of Femex, but interesting. Excited to. Now I have.
Well, yeah, that's why we do Degen News. It's for stuff you wouldn't hear about otherwise.
Stuff that you wouldn't otherwise know. All right. Well, I guess
we did it. Go. Let's go for it.
All right, we're back. Uniswap.
Hey, before we even get started, Uniswap. Why do you have so much to say about Uniswap? Do you love Uniswap? Do you hate Uniswap? What do you think? Tell me.
Yes. I think Uniswap did more for DeFi and blockchain single-handedly than any other application in the space. Not necessarily because it's more sophisticated or more advanced, but I think it opened up a new paradigm of how things on chain could function. And I mean, obviously over the last 5-6 years that Uniswap's been out, I mean, a lot of things have happened and a lot of things have changed, and we've learned a lot about, on-chain market making and trustlessness and all these things. So Uniswap to me is just a big foundational piece of the evolution of blockchain. So especially from a finance perspective. So I think Uniswap is and remains relevant and probably will be for the foreseeable future.
Do you have any opinions about their governance?
Yeah. Who would guess that I have opinions on something? So I'll get into the governance in a second, but I think another reason why Uniswap is kind of at the forefront of the news is that they're a protocol that's just kind of been steady Eddie. They've released a few versions recently, not recently, but over the last couple of years. They've hinted now at a new version, Uniswap v4, that they're working on, which again brings in a bunch of new dimensions, which is pretty interesting. And so, anyways, all of that to say, I think Uniswap is poised for some sort of momentum builder here. It's a huge protocol, big market cap. It's a blue chip. A lot of people are expecting that because of its volumes and because of its revenue and because of how long it's been available and how many users use it and how many times it's built into composable workflows, it's got some value. And that value, in theory, as assets and market caps increase, that value should continue to increase. So I think there's a lot of speculation around Uniswap. Another thing that I think is kind of interesting is, and we haven't heard Uniswap at all opine on this, other than they've kind of stayed consistent with the fact that they're decentralization maxis as far as they can be. They haven't said much about regulation, but all it would take is Uniswap to change their approach slightly, and the whole space could have a shakeup. And I think with RWAs and all of these things coming in, there's a lot of people thinking about how to play in the regulated world. It would be crazy to think that Uniswap isn't thinking about that. Their in-house counsel is deep in TradFi and regulation, smart guy. Anyways, they've got a really good team at Uniswap. So all of that to say, it's not surprising that there's some excitement. The market seems to be somewhat recovering a little bit, giving us some indication that maybe it's not completely dead for the rest of time. And this is just a natural spot to look. Okay, governance. Uniswap as another example, I guess, of how they contributed so deeply to the foundations of how blockchain currently works is Uniswap governance wasn't the first, but was one of the early major governance platforms that captured a ton of value. And so when they did their airdrop, I can't remember what the market cap was, the initial Uniswap airdrop, but it was obnoxious. Like, the market cap went bananas. There was a bunch of VCs involved. They had raised a shit pile of money. And this was the first time that at a meaningful large scale, an individual protocol was going to have governance. Now, they're not the only one. Curve has been governance since day one. I mean, Balancers had a lot of governance, Aave, Compound, etc. But I think Uniswap was probably the largest and the most obvious, that had the most attention on it at first. What I think they've realized, and we've all realized this if you're paying attention to governance at all in the space, but what works from a governance structure when it's small, when it's a small protocol and small market cap, doesn't necessarily scale linearly to when it's a big protocol with a big market cap and bigger decisions to be made. And so some of the things like quorums and how their quorums are established and what's required for a vote to pass and all of these processes, I think has left a lot to be desired, not just Uniswap, but everybody. And one of the things that is a challenge in bear markets is if you set your governance requirements and thresholds to bull market values or numbers or participation, that may be too aggressive during a bear when there's not as many people paying attention. The market cap and the value of the assets have gone down significantly. This particular article, I know this is the biggest intro to one freaking article ever, but this particular article is talking about how Uniswap, as far as I understand, for the first time, has had to delegate 10 million. You're muted.
I was totally muted because of things. It's not just the one article. We're presenting it as one, but it's kind of blown up, at least on my Twitter and LinkedIn a little bit, because they made some changes to what was originally promised.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what I'm trying to point out here, is that we as a space need to be a hell of a lot more accepting of evolving governance, because the expectation that you set governance once and nothing will ever change, I think, is insane. Like, it just doesn't make sense. It's the same thing with like corporate governance and SOPs inside of an entity. Like, what we set up a year ago is,
or the SEC.
Or the SEC. So yeah, I mean, this one is I think where there's a lot of people that are like kind of wrangling over who's right on this one has a lot to do with the fact that Uniswap has always kind of said we're decentralization at all costs as best we can. This is a very strong centralization action where they literally are deciding who else gets to vote by delegating to them, or who gets greater voting power. And so that's one side of the argument, is saying, well, they're just voting for people that want, or they're delegating to people that have the same desired outcome that they do. Yeah, maybe. That might be the case. Or it might just be they're delegating to someone that actually has meaningful analysts and doing research and is someone valuable to the governance process. Who knows? All of that being said, I think the other side of the argument is, okay, cool. Like, yes, it's maybe slightly more centralized, but until we have a larger overhaul of governance, we can't get shit done without, this type of thing happening, leading to greater quorums and all of that kind of stuff. So anyways, this is, I can see why it's blown up a little bit. I haven't paid much attention to it because it, to me, is pretty straightforward.
So can I just say what they actually did? What's controversial?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Essentially, they have really low participation in their governance right now. And so they decided that they were going to boost participation by allocating 10 million uni tokens. In this way, they would be able to get people to, vote and do that kind of thing. But they were only supposed to give 4 people these tokens. And they ended up actually having 7 people they gave tokens to, because obviously that's better. You're going to have more people voting. But they had so much support for this concept that they decided to expand it. And some people are upset because that means not as many tokens went to each person. And some people are upset because, if I'd known they were going to do more people, maybe I would have applied and that kind of thing. So I think people are upset for absolutely no reason. And if you were already participating in uni governance, you wouldn't be upset about this at all.
You'd probably just be happy that something got through. Well, again, the people that are on the side of whatever was passed are going to be happy. Everybody else is going to be annoyed. I think what caused a lot of this discomfort, for lack of a better phrase, I think was the fact that only 18.5 million tokens were involved in the vote. 10 million of those were delegated by Uniswap, and it was only slightly a pass. So that means that without a shadow of a doubt, those delegated tokens not just brought the quorum up, but also guaranteed a win, which...
I mean, true, but also at least somebody did something. I don't know. That's been my attitude lately. Is like, at least you're out there doing it.
I see both sides of the governance argument. I see it from the protocol perspective. I see it from the user's perspective. I mean, Vitalik has talked a lot about governance, about some of the challenges with ETH governance, and although there's a lot of things they want to do, the implementation is challenging. And anyways, and he's talked a lot about quadratic voting and other ways to kind of democratize voting power a little bit, or make it so that if you want to boost your voting power for different reasons, there's a cost to doing that. So you have to be sure that you really want that outcome. Anyways, there's some really cool strategies on this, but yeah, there's a lot of people who are not necessarily happy with on either side of the equation. We're not happy with how this all shook out. So
other things, though, that people maybe will be happy about is that we're getting closer to Uni V4.
Yeah.
So V3 came out in, I want to say 2021. Does that seem correct?
Yeah.
And V4 was announced that it was being built, I believe, in June this year. But now we are seeing actually on the repository and what have you, that there's a lot more development activity. So people are pretty excited about that. I haven't actually been able to find a date that's anticipated for V4 yet. But some of the experiments that they're trying, some of the stuff that they want to include going forward is time-weighted average market makers, on-chain limit orders, internalized MEV profits, but they haven't limited it. Essentially, if you're a dev and you're building with them and you're willing to go for it, they are there to make it work. And so, yeah, there's hook contracts, there's all kinds of things. Yeah, and people seem pretty excited about that.
One of the biggest criticisms of Uniswap has always been combination of just the way that the mechanism design is and the cost on ETH is gas has been expensive. So probably one of the biggest innovations on this is just significantly reduced gas costs. But all of these other things that they're talking about, building in and internalizing MEV profits, on-chain order books, on-chain limit orders, and all of that stuff. I mean, there's been a lot of companies, us included, that have built those infrastructure pieces to bolt on. But there's limitations because we don't control Uniswap as a platform. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that Uniswap could do to make those a lot more efficient, on-chain limit orders, and well, many things actually. There's a lot of things that Uniswap can make better, but that one in particular, limit orders, time-weighted average market making, like all of these things are pretty big deals. Internalizing that MEV, like again, it's very difficult to do as a third party, but Uniswap has an opportunity here to really make a meaningful, innovative step again in their technology. Another thing that they're also doing, as far as I understood, is they've built the application now so that if and when regulation comes in, it's orders of magnitude easier to bolt on.
Yeah.
Which is probably the reason for the next article, or at least.
Okay, and so they are looking at, actually, just before we go there, they are looking at licensing structures as well. Yeah. So I think that's pretty smart for thinking about regulation and institutional use and what that might look like.
They're going to have a
However,
similar problem.
They've been really clear that governance will maintain in the hands of tokens.
Yeah, they have a similar problem to Coinbase in that Uniswap probably will find themselves in pretty hot water with the SEC at some point. Yeah. And so if they turn around and come and apply for licenses, assuming things are securities, that's going to look kind of interesting. It's almost an admission that what they were doing was wrong. Yeah. So I think they've been, I think, intentionally quiet on this. But people are starting to pay attention. Will there be a big SEC involvement in Uniswap? I don't know. I would think so, probably just based on what's happened recently, but hopefully not. Mm-hmm. Even with that in mind, they've got a lot of money. And they make insane revenue. Uniswap. It's one of the few protocols, DeFi protocols, that actually is profitable. Yeah. And so, anyway, all of that to say,
price go up.
people are excited. Go ahead.
No, all of that to say, price go up. People are excited, and it's going for it. We have a few different articles that we found about forecasting. So there's Rect, and I believe there's JJ's, and there's a few other ones. But everyone is saying, we really think that Uniswap is going to see a little bit of a spike when they, launch before, which, yes, obviously, but also people are interested that they think the bull is going to happen soon. So people are trying to onboard prior to actual launches, that kind of thing. So there's been a pretty big price increase in Uni.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said this at the beginning of the show, but I think there's quite a few reasons that people are paying attention to Uniswap. General market momentum, I talk a lot about the waterfall effect, where Bitcoin and ETH take some profit, people take that profit off the table, reinvest it in the next tier down of blue chips, and then large caps, shitcoins. So Uniswap, obviously being in the blue chip category, this just all makes sense. That there's some natural excitement, some natural attention to it, and then you couple that with V4 being, there's a lot of talk and speculation around V4. Again, as you mentioned, the developer flexibility for implementing the routers into different protocols is going to be much more advanced. So very exciting. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of attention being paid to Uniswap, as evidenced by how many people are talking about the governance thing. So yeah, I think it makes sense to me. We're probably going to see more of this. Like, we got to pay attention for these key storylines and narratives with some of these larger protocols. I think Chainlink is probably going to see a pretty interesting surge at some point here in the next little while too, mainly because everybody's complaining about how it's down and not moving and yada yada. But anyways, there'll be a lot of fun stuff to pay attention to coming up.
On price go up.
Yeah, this one's weird.
We've also got Sol.
So again, I've not really understood why anybody is paying attention to Solana at the moment.
Okay, so my Twitter feed says it's Solana NFTs. That's the big thing right now. NFTs have picked up steam on Sol. I have not fact-checked this at all, just for the record.
The last cycle, Solana was the second largest NFT ecosystem, which makes sense. They built Magic Eden on Solana, and there was just some pretty interesting marketing and narratives and liquidity mining, and there was just a ton of crazy stuff going on last cycle. The challenge is that Solana has some major issues with their blockchain design, the data storage. It's still down often. It's a really unreliable chain still. Now, it's my understanding, and Anatoly's a smart guy, so it's my understanding that they are working on fixes for a lot of this stuff. And Neon Labs launched the EVM on Solana, which is also interesting. But again, I don't think either one of those things is important enough at the moment to substantiate the relatively interesting rise. I mean, we were just talking yesterday about NFTs on ETH finally beating out NFTs on BTC. Solana was not mentioned in that at all. So, I mean, yes, there's a resurgence of NFTs, but is it big enough to keep them in the top 10? I don't think so. But
okay, well, let's go into some Degen bad news just to like balance us out a little bit.
Yeah,
Kyber's having a bad time. Womp womp. Kyber has faced a number. I mean, they're so huge, right? That's how it's going to be. But they've faced a number of threats and attacks over the last few years. They usually take it pretty well in stride, and they try to make people whole as quickly as possible, and so on and so forth. But this one's been a little bit funny in terms of PR for Kyber because they initially put out a 9% bounty, and then the hacker came forward and said, "I'll take 9% and give you the other stuff back." And instead, Kyber threatened legal action, and it's gone back and forth a bit. It doesn't seem like it's good, but Kyber has recovered 4.67 million of the 46 million from just front-running bot operators. So I don't really know what their plan here is. Like, usually Kyber is pretty steady and has a good plan and good community relations. And this one, they've been flip-flopping a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's really inopportune. The Kyber team has been around for a minute. They've had their fair share of adversity, and they've done quite well getting through most of it. Again, this is a major setback going into the bull, right? Everybody's hoping for positive momentum, not necessarily something like this. I mean, I think the standard response to these types of incidents, I don't think there's a clear path on the best way to do it, right? As regulation comes out a little bit, as the SEC gets a little bit more involved, and as law enforcement gets a little bit more involved globally, there's a lot more suggestions of involving them early on in these conversations. I can see why that may have been mentioned, although probably inflammatory to the conversation that they're having. Again, we've talked about, the 10%, the 10% bounty. Mm-hmm. That's pretty standard in the space. The person gets $5 million for exploiting this. This is unfortunately one of those things that just happens with novel technologies. KyberSwap's done some interesting stuff, deviating from every other fork in the space, and in many ways. And unfortunately, that leaves unknown unknowns.
Okay, more weird kind of bad news. You ready? Azuki is an NFT project that primarily did PFPs. They had 10,000 anime PFPs, and they had a couple other things. And basically, one of the founders of Azuki, called Zagabond, had a $39 million worth NFT minting incident in June. And so the group, like the community of Azuki, tried to sue Zagabond, and Zagabond stepped out so that he wasn't part of the project anymore, and people took over the project. And anyway, it hasn't gone well. So Azuki wants to basically oust Zagabond entirely, give up the lawsuit, and move on with their lives, but then reinvigorate their NFT market and their NFT PFPs. So they are rebranding to Bean.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes it's trying to become a meme coin now, which I also don't understand. Azuki, there was a lot of excitement over Azuki last cycle. Mm-hmm. It was cool, kind of edgy art, kind of 3D realism. I was a big fan personally of Azuki. The problem with many of these NFT projects is when the music stops or when the tide goes out, you see how many people aren't wearing pants, to quote the great Warren Buffett. And unfortunately, many of these NFT projects had no pants on. And there was no real utility. And we've been saying this, there's no real value proposition. You have some piece of art created by some artist somewhere that you otherwise would never have heard of. It's not like they're internationally famed. And there's extraordinary amounts of cash being moved around. No wonder when again, when the music stops, a lot of these platforms really have nothing to stand on. What is the IP here? What is the art? Does it matter? Do people care? The answer is, I think at this point, maybe not.
This one's a little bit interesting too, because aside from the lack of utility, Zagabond essentially launched more NFTs, and they're saying that diluted the market so much that the original NFT prices fell by 44%. But I mean, that could also just be the cycle. It could be the lack of interest in the NFT.
I think the value would have fallen anyways. But inflation obviously magnifies that. I don't know enough about the specific details. I actually didn't hear about this in June, so I have no idea. But I mean, this will be interesting as a case study, I think, because Azuki was a big enough brand that had enough support from enough influencers in the NFT culture art space that if they can't turn it around, then that I think signals more significant challenges for the space as a whole. If they can turn it around, they've got some good community, they've got some momentum, they've got a brand that's established. If they can turn it around, I think it will be very promising, and will start to pave the path for how some of these PFP style projects actually start to build something meaningful and create value. I hope all my PFP projects do, because they're all worth nothing.
Okay. Are you a CoinW fan? Do you have anything on CoinW?
No,
Right.
never.
Well, CoinW is working with soccer icon Andrea Pirlo.
Is that a guy or girl?
Clearly I soccer. Clearly I football. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting because they are an exchange that is quite touted for their security, and they want to see how they might be able to onboard new users via sports. And I think this is interesting because we do see a lot in terms of SportFi that are like trading cards and collectibles and that sort of thing. But this looks as though it will be a little bit of a different collaboration where Andrea is actually a global brand ambassador, but in a way that's like legal and hopefully won't face scrutiny.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me a lot of FTX and crypto.com. In the last little bit, crypto.com still exists, so that's handy. But they went kind of bananas on celebrity endorsements and team sponsorships, sports team sponsorships, and all this other stuff. I mean, I understand why Pirlo did it. He probably got paid a buttload of money to represent the brand and be a global ambassador. Sometimes I wonder if it's as valuable as people think. It's one thing to have your name everywhere and have that brand recognition, but like, even if I'm an athlete, do I give a shit what Andrea Pirlo says about CoinW? Like, do I care? Like, does that make me want to use this? Like, I don't know. I kind of struggle with this a little bit. Celebrity endorsements, I've always struggled with. I get it. I understand influencer marketing. I understand.
You mean you don't drink more bubbly because of Michael Bublé?
No, I don't. I buy LaCroix because it's at Costco. But yeah, you know,
Costco here.
What?
Bubbly's at Costco here.
Yeah, it's not here, I don't think. But anyways, I don't know. Like, I kind of, again, this is another one of those ones where like I stand kind of in the center on it, which is weird. Because I can see that the argument that it's a waste. I think it's a waste. And then I can see the flip side that when it works huge. And so I can see why people try it. I don't think it has a high probability of success. I've also never heard of this Pirlo guy, but I also don't football. So
yeah, we're maybe not the best football soccer reviewers. We're like, that seems like a useless brand ambassador, but also maybe it's really good. We have no idea. Some
of our viewers from Latin America and Europe are going to be super happy with us right now. But anyways, all right. Well, let's we can end it there for the day.
No, we got to do Femex. It's important.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because Femex is quite a large exchange, even though you hadn't heard of them. They have a lot of licenses in many countries, including Canada, and they have licenses with FinTrack, and they're doing a medium good job. But their big thing right now is that they are taking on the term hybrid finance, which is where they believe TradFi and DeFi will meet. I don't really need to talk about this anymore, but I wanted to introduce the term hybrid finance because everyone tries to coin their own term: blockchain finance, modern finance, hybrid finance.
We actually coined that phrase. So Femex is going to owe me money for this one, I think. But we've been talking about the future is not either or, it's going to be a hybrid. So this to me is timely and accurate. I don't know a ton about them, but definitely worth looking into, because I think, again, that's going to be a prevailing narrative this cycle, is the transition or the implementation of compliance and regulation. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. All right. And so they're looking at basically tying like your SIN number to like a soul-bound token.
For everybody not in Canada, a SIN number is the same as your social security number.
Which is the same as, they have other names in other countries.
Yeah. Well, everybody knows what a social security number is, though.
Do they?
SIN number could just be how much money you spent on cigarettes and alcohol in the last year.
Yeah, that's what it is. I think that's what your number in Canada is.
Must be.
All right.
Must be. All right. That's it. We're a live show, as you can tell by the banter. We will be here day, Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out. And today I say to you, Kiara,
go FUD yourself.
Bye.